Welcome back to Chess Dog. This is John, and today we have a very interesting game for you. It comes from the video World Grandmaster, or WGM, Nemo hustles trash talker with brutal bluff. Now, this is when Women's Grandmaster Nemo, she also has the name AkaNemsko, went to Coffee Chess and played Boston Mike. Now, Boston Mike is known for his skills with his mouth more than his skills on the chessboard. He's a big-time trash talker. If you could become a professional trash talker, I bet he would probably be a very successful one. So she comes and plays Boston Mike. Now, he doesn't know how strong she is. She's WGM is a very strong player. It's like just below an international master, like maybe 50 rating points below international master. So she's really strong. He's probably somewhere in the 1,300 to 1,500 range, I'd guess. And he has no idea how strong she is. It's a good question. Who would that be good for him or not? And this is the game. It's a blitz game, and it's really fascinating how it develops when you get this huge gap between players, and he doesn't even know how good she is. So he has white. He plays c4, e5 of the English opening, knight c3, knight c6, e4, bishop to b4, d3, knight f6, bishop to d2, castles, knight f3, now d6. Now here you'll see there's a weakness at d4. And what Women's Grandmaster Nemo wants to do is develop her bishop to g4 and take that knight on f3 off the board so she can take advantage of that weakness at d4. She plays d6, bishop e2, bishop to g4. Now, the stronger player has the black pieces here. If you look at White's position, he's developed, right? He's got the pieces off the back rank. They don't really work together very well, but they're okay. The position isn't bad or anything. He's developed his pieces. He has some control over the center. It's a playable position. He castles, queen to d7. Now he makes a really good move. a3. He's going to expand on the queen side while gaining tempos against her bishop. Bishop a5, b4, bishop to b6. Bishop to e3. And so he at least senses that the d4 square is weak and plays the bishop to e3 to challenge it. She goes ahead and carries out that threat that she had earlier to try to remove a defender from the d4 square by taking that knight. Bishop f3, bishop d4. So she plants her bishop on that square on d4. What she wants is for him to take the bishop. And then she retakes with the knight, and she's got her knight on a really nice, juicy central square. But he really makes a good move here. He doesn't bite. He doesn't fall for it. He plays rook to c1. He just defends the knight on c3. And that's a really impressive move. He's playing very well here. And it's possible the fact that he didn't know how strong she was is helping him play better chess, because that's a really good move. She plays a5. And this isn't a very good move. And the idea of it is White will respond with b5, and the dark squares on the queen side will be a little weak, c5, b6. But she's in no position to take advantage of that. So what ends up happening is he just gains space, and the weaker dark squares don't actually hurt him at all. He's fine there. So b7, b5, kicking the knight. The knight goes back to e7. Now, if the queen weren't on d7 and she could play that knight at f6 to, say, d7, c5, that would be fine. But that's not available. He plays a4, and now here he should take on d4. And that way he can plug up that d4 hole that he has in his position. It'll be very hard to exploit it after that. So something like bishop d4, ed4, knight e2, attacking that pawn, and after c5, take en passant, and the knight has to retake to keep d4 defended, and then rook to b1. And White has a great position here. White is just clearly better. Black has these weak pawns on d5 and d4 and d6, excuse me, and a half open file with a weakness on b7. The rook controls it. White's pieces, I should say, White's pieces are in very good shape, and White is doing quite well in this position. But instead he played a4, knight to g6. Now, at this point, Nemo says that she prefers White's position. And what she should have done instead of knight to g6, she should have taken on e3 and fe3. And in this position, White may be a little bit better because White controls a lot of central squares, but this is very much a playable position for Black. If Black is worse, it's not by much. But she plays knight to g6. He plays bishop to g5. By the way, if you're getting value from this video, be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already. What he wants to do is take the knight on f6 and create a weakness on f5. This is a very sophisticated maneuver, and he must be getting better because he's really playing good chess. He's playing right there with her, really keeping pace. Queen to e6 wants to defend the knight so that she doesn't have to recapture with the pawn, which would create those weaknesses. Here he has a really good move. He could have played knight to d5, which hits that c7 square. And after knight recaptures, pawn takes. That c file is really tough for White to deal with. The pressure for Black, Black to deal with. The pressure White has on that c7 pawn it's unbearable. For example, Black has to move the queen because it's under attack. Let's say plays to c8 to defend that pawn. Bishop g4, pushing the queen away, queen to b8. And then he has two choices. He can play rook to c4 and just triple on the c file and come crashing through. Or he could even play something like h4, attacking on the king side, putting pressure on that knight. Either way, he's better. Instead, he plays bishop to e3. She plays knight to f4. Now, the possibilities are still here for White. Here, White could play bishop takes d4, ed4, knight to d5, knight d5, cd5, and you have the exact same problem with this c7 pawn and the pressure on that half-open c-file. Plays knight to d5, knight 65, cd5. So he gets it anyway. Ends up getting the half-open c-file anyway. The queen has to move away. He played queen to d2, but bishop takes d4 seems strong to me. Pawn takes, and then rook to c4. You gain a tempo attacking the d4 pawn, and you prepare to triple or double on the c-file. He plays queen to d2, knight to g6. Now, this game is 20 moves in, and with this huge rating gap between the two, he's a little bit better. I mean, he's really played well against her. He finally takes on d4, ed4, and Boston Mike now has a winning position against women's Grandmaster Nemo. He is winning this position, and a huge upset is brewing. He plays queen to b2. c7 is a bit of a softer target than d4, but he attacks the d4 pawn. Knight to e5. She threatens to take on d3. He sees that. Moves the bishop to e2. f5. Queen d4. Now he's got material gains. Not only is his position better, but he's now got some material advantage that he can hold on to. f4. She wants to play f3, sacrifice the pawn, but open up some lines of attack. She knows she's worse here. Her only hope is some trickery against his king. Without that, he's just going to win. He plays f3, great move. He sees it coming and stops it. Rook to f6, shifting the rook over, a rook lift to attack the king. Rook to f2, rook to h6, h3, queen to g5. Now, she is threatening rook takes h3 because the pawn on g2 is pinned by the queen. So he moves the king over. Very good tactical vision with a quick time control. The queen comes back to e7, queen to c3. Now, when I analyzed this game, my computer gave White an almost a +6 advantage in this position. I mean, it's over. The d-pawn can kick out the centralized knight. c7 is falling. It's over. She played c5. All she can do is create complications and hope for the best now. bc6, bc6, dc6. Boston Mike has added a strong c-pawn to his position, only 2 moves away from the queening square. Rook to c8 to stop it. c7, getting closer. d5. So right now, white has a huge advantage. And what white should do is play ed5. And he's still winning. But he plays d4. And Nemo's move, WGM Nemo's move here, is easy to miss. But it basically resets the balance. Now, white only has a very, very small advantage after this move. Rook to c6. Now, this is a hard move to miss for 2 reasons. One, the rook is coming from a long ways off, right? It's a long move, and long moves are hard to see. The second, in order for this to work, the rook has to be defended by the knight, and the knight is currently under attack. But it works because the rook is attacking the queen. So that's a hard move to see, easy move to miss. Queen to a1, rook c1, queen c1, rook to c7. Queen to d2. Now, Women's Grandmaster Nemo returns the favor. She plays knight to c4, and this is a mistake. The right move is also really hard to see, even for a strong player, and that's queen to b4. Now, it looks like white will just take the queen and then just take the knight and would be up a piece. The reason that doesn't work is this: queen b4, eb4, and if pawn takes knight, rook to c1 check, and now the bishop has to give itself up to stop. It's the only way to stop check. Bishop d1, rook d1, and this position is equal. King to e2, rook to b1, and white cannot take this pawn on d5. Now, this would be great for white if it worked, but after rook a2 check, king e1, rook f2, king f2, the b pawn could not be stopped. So it would end up being an equal position. But instead, Grandmaster Nemo plays the knight to c4, bishop takes c4, dc4, and now white has a big advantage again. All Boston Mike has to do is stop her c-pawn from queening. He can block it and stop it. He's got those beautiful central pawns, a great position, and is winning. Queen to a5, that's fine. That's a good move, gets an extra pawn. c3. Now, red alert time. Anytime that c-pawn or any pawn is close to the queening square, that red alert siren should be going off in our heads. He has to blockade this pawn. He has to play rook to c2 to keep that pawn from advancing. If he does, he's in great shape. He plays d5, and it's a terrible blunder. And white goes from completely winning to completely losing. He was so close to beating an incredibly strong player. After c2, she's winning. The pawn has to be captured in order to stop it from queening, and so the rook is given up. There are a few checks: queen a8, king f7, queen b8, queen f6, which threatens queen to a1, which would be mate in 2, queen to b1 to stop the queen to a1 threat, queen to c3, queen to b7, king g6, queen to b6, king to h5, and he's running out of his checks. g4, fg3, and that's it. Queen to b1, queen takes f3 check, king to e1, queen to e2 check. It's a real shame. You know, he had a chance at a massive upset, and maybe his chess is catching up with his mouth. Who knows? But I thought it was a really enjoyable game, and it was really interesting to see a very strong player up against the ropes against someone who was an okay coffee house player, but improving fast. Thank you for joining us at Chess Dog. And if you want to see another interesting game that involved a hustle, check out the video in front of you now. Talk to you later.